Too bad, man.
Great.
Thanks, guys, for joining.
Of course.
Yeah.
I know you were back in London a few weeks ago, right? How was it?
Cold.
It was good. Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Well, we have everybody in here, and we're all excited. They're joining from their computers too.
Cool.
Okay, perfect.
Just to kick things off, Ali, do you want to just give me like a rundown on what you guys are hoping to see today? Just to confirm.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure thing. And maybe I can share my screen really quick. So basically what we did so far is we started our first round of ideation, just thumbnail sketches. And the goal right now is how to translate that first round into, your beginnings of an aesthetic package sketch. So all of them should have a beginning package, but now it's all about the aesthetic. So how can you start sketching around this and eventually, go more into that overlay and eventually surfacing. So anything you can show us on just taking 2D sketches, especially more automotive looking sketches, and then beginning to create a gravity sketch underlay that you can use, but also just getting to that theme. So pretty much around this level right here. Does that make sense?
That's perfect. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And just to keep in mind, this is a Studio One, so it's the very first time they're designing mobility, and also the first time they're, immersed in automotive design. So lots of new concepts. So anything you can give them also from, our experience in automotive, anything like that helps. But
sounds
yeah,
good.
thank you.
All right, and just give me a shout whenever you guys are ready. I'm just downloading an image right now.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we are, and some students are joining from their computer also, but I'm projecting it on the TV, so everyone is seeing, and they can type questions in the chat or jump in, whatever works best.
Okay, sounds good. Just setting up my screen here a little bit. Okay, ready when you guys are. Let's kick off here.
Yep, all good from our side.
Cool. All right, hey everybody. Yeah, just exactly what Alejandro was saying before is what we're going to go over today. So I just went on Google Images and downloaded just a really simple car sketch. It's a good one, but it's a simple one. And what we're going to do now is just focus on bringing that into VR. Some of you guys might already know this, but I'm just going to cover it really quick, just in case. So let me screen share my second screen here. Okay, cool. So when you pull up Landing Pad, by default, you're going to have that personal workspace here. And what we're going to want to do immediately is take this and switch it over to your school organization account. So we have Cincinnati.
All the way down, university.
I see University of Cincinnati.
Yeah, should be up
right there.
Yeah.
Cool. So then that's going to give us our university org. And what we can do now is grab our image and drag and drop it into the main menu here. And that will load the image into the space. You're not going to see it if you have a filter on. That's what this little section is up here. And I have the sketches filter on. So I'm going to exit out of that. And then we'll see, we actually have that 2D image that I imported here. So simple Porsche sketch, but it's a few lines that we'll be able to, convert into a 3D sketch. After you're done with that, you don't have to worry about Landing Pad anymore. So I'm going to close Landing Pad and jump into my headset and kick off the demo here. Okay, so just like on Landing Pad, what we're going to need to do in the main menu here is click the drop-down menu and go to University of Cincinnati. There we go. All right, so switch to the college organization. And then I'm going to click New Sketch here. Let me just turn on Smooth Head Cam so this looks better for you. Okay, that should be better. And now what we're going to do is drag and drop our 2D image into the space. So first thing, press the blue menu button, come down here to reference images, and then we have two folders here with a cloud icon on it. That means that we dropped it in through landing pad. And we put that under the school organization. So I'll click that folder and then reach in, grab, and pull out that sketch into the environment. And now I'm done with this menu. I can just press the blue menu button again and get rid of that. What you'll notice when you first drag an image in is that when you're navigating and moving yourself around the environment, that image is not moving around with you. So what we want to do is anchor that to the actual environment by grabbing and holding the image. And once you're holding this image, you'll see a the blue menu button turns into a little anchor icon. So grab and hold the image like this, press the blue button, and now whenever we scale and move, that image comes along with us. So we can grab the image and use both grab triggers and move our arms apart and towards each other to scale this up, just like you would scale yourself up and down throughout the environment. But you're holding the image first, so that's how it selects this image to be able to be scaled. Cool. Next thing we want to do is set up the environment a little bit here. So you can press the blue menu button and go to settings here. And under settings, you have these 4 submenus. You might have already explored these, but 99% of the time, you're going to be on this first one here, sketching in. And so there's a few options that you'll be turning on and off as you're going throughout the design process in VR. And so you kind of use this menu as a quick selection menu. So the first thing we're going to turn on here is the mirror tool. So as soon as we turn that mirror tool on, we'll see that the stylus is replicated on the other side of the mirror. And if we start drawing, everything is, replicated on either side. If it's a little difficult for you in the beginning to see where this mirror plane is and you want some sort of a visual aid, you can use this little slider down here. It's called mirror style and it has hidden. That means it's off, fixed, and then auto scale. And essentially what this does is it just gives you a gray box that shows you where the mirror plane is in the environment. And that can be really useful for some people while they're sketching. I'm going to turn that off in the meantime. I just kind of think it's a little bit of visual clutter. And what we can also do is turn on the stage floor. Now, there's 2 sections for this, round and square. That's just the visual appeal of the stage floor. But the nice thing about this feature is as you're sketching, the larger you sketch, the larger the stage floor becomes. So it tries to fit the size of the geometry that you have in the space. This is not an object. You can't grab it, move it, scale it, affect it in any way. Just whenever you sketch, it will expand to fit the geometry. But it provides a really nice base for whatever you're creating. What we want to do now is take this 2D image here and place this on the mirror plane so that we're actually sketching it as a true side view and building off of that. So what we can do here is grab the image, and if you just drag it over to the mirror plane like this, you'll see even if I bring this in at like an angle, it will automatically magnetically attach itself to the mirror. So that's kind of nice. You just have to get it close to the mirror plane like this, and it will snap right to the mirror plane. And then we'll let go of that for a second and set up our wheelbase. So we want to root this in some sort of reality. And a wheelbase is a really great place to start because it gives you that base to start sketching around and transforming your 2D image out into a 3D sketch. So we'll press the blue menu button here and move down below reference images to prefabs and click this option up here in the upper right-hand corner called Rig Chassis. So as soon as you click that, your menu is going to change, and then you'll have something that populates in the center of the environment, and that is our rig chassis. You can see all these different blue arrows. You can grab these arrows and push and pull them, and it will auto-adjust that chassis. It will also change the sizing of the tires and the wheel walls right here, and the interior and exterior circumference of it. And if you don't want to mess around with making a sort of an eyeballed chassis like that, there's also preset chassis in this bottom section right here. So it shows it blank right now. That's because we don't have anything selected. But if we click next or back, we can cycle through different vehicle types. So for instance, we could do a small coupe. And as soon as you press the check mark here in the center between the 2 arrows, it will auto adjust this chassis to fit that new segment that you've selected. So let's do, we have supercars here, supercar, small mid-engine, exotic. We'll just run with this one here. By the way, if you wanted to plug in a specific wheelbase or any of these dimensions specifically, you can come here and click on the measurement readout and then type in exactly what you want. We don't have anything specific for a base, so we're just going to go with the presets right here. Then you can press the blue check mark on the left-hand controller, and that's going to exit you out of adjusting this chassis. If you need to adjust this chassis again, you can come back to this selection, click on it again under the prefabs menu on the blue button, and make all the changes that you want to make. And actually, we will be coming back to this later to convert this to real geometry, and I'll cover that. I'll cover that in a minute. But for right now, we'll press the blue check mark, grab our sketch again, and then scale this up and down and try and get it, like roughly over top of the wheelbase that we have here. All right, it is just a loose sketch, so we're not going to try and cement it into reality too much here. We're just going to eyeball it and then make our changes while we're sketching this design out. So I'll make it a little bit shorter and move it back like this. And actually, maybe I'll even go back to the rig chassis here and just change the dimensions of the rig chassis to match the sketch a little bit more. Okay, so that looks pretty good. What we want to do now is start to get into layers so that we can segment things out and just keep a nice tidy workstation while we're creating the sketch. So if you press the blue menu button right below prefabs where we just were is layers. And if you click on layers, this already looks pretty familiar to some other softwares. And we have the chassis laid out already. This is on its own layer here. And then we have a default layer that you start off with. You always start off with a single layer. It will always be called layer 1, and it's active right now because it has this magnifying glass on it. If you want to choose what layer is active, you just click in this empty gray space here and press the index finger. Oops. And whatever layer has that magnifying glass is the active layer. So whatever you're creating goes on that layer. Cool, so the chassis layer is already labeled. What we'll do is click on layer 1, press clear on this keyboard. By the way, if you want to reposition this keyboard, you just grab and hold this border. It should highlight purple when you intersect it, and then you can just kind of place this in your environment. So press clear, and then we'll type in sketch, blue check mark, and now we've named that layer, and we can lock the chassis layer as well. Okay, so we have symmetrical sketching now, and actually before we start sketching out this vehicle, I do want to do something to just stylistically make our sketch line look a little bit better. When you first open the program, you get this kind of dull gray sketch line with, like a basic shader on it. And what we're going to do is press on the color menu button here, right below the red button, press and hold, push all the way in on that wheel that pops up here. That's how you change depth of color, and then let go of the button. So now we're sketching with a nice black sketch line. And then I'm also going to press the same button again and select a new material from above this color menu. This color wheel. So we have basic, reflective, tune, flat, and clay. Now I want to view this as a sketch right now, so I'm going to choose flat material, and that gets rid of any of the shading that this 3D object that we're sketching has. So I kind of just view this as a sketch line. All right. Looks like I didn't create a layer for my actual 2D sketch. So I'm going to go back to layers here, press the plus sign, create a new layer, click on the name, and we will do 2D sketch. And in order to place things on a layer that you've just created or shift it between layers, you reach out, grab the object that you want to place on a new layer, hold it the entire time, and then intersect your controller with the layer that you want to place it on. Now, a lot of people, when they first try this, they think that you intersect the object with the layer, but instead, actually, it's this little red dot at the center of your controller that you're going to intersect with the layer. And you'll know you're doing this correctly whenever the layer highlights green. And when it does highlight green, you can let go of the grab button while it's highlighting green, and you can test if it's on that new layer just by flicking the visibility up and down like this. So let's lock that, turn the visibility down a little bit, and then click in the empty gray space on our sketch layer so that this is now the active layer again. Okay, so with that sorted out now, I'll show you a couple of ways that you can approach this loose sketch. If you want to, you could just get in to start sketching or to sketching like this where maybe you sketch like a loose side view and then you grab it and you move it outwards and just start, placing some of these sketch lines. I think this is kind of a good exercise just to maybe not actually make this a 3D sketch, but just to understand where your lines are in 3D space. It's kind of fun to see if you're actually correctly laying these down and then zoom out and see where these lines are being placed in 3D space. But there's actually more precise ways of doing this. So one of those is to sketch a side view and then take that side view and extract it out in the x-axis here. So you can actually sketch on a 2D plane in Gravity Sketch so that you're not sketching in 3D space like this by applying a parameter to one of your drawing tools. So if we press the purple menu button here, we have all of our creation tools. And right now we're using our ink tool. And if you click on any of these tools twice, you'll get this menu that appears on the right-hand side of the tool with all these different parameters that apply to that specific tool. And you can kind of see that because I'm clicking through here and each of these menus is different. If you click on the ink tool twice and you look at this menu, you have an option here called planar. And you can turn this to the right and you'll notice that your stylus is gone and it's replaced with this red laser. And the stylus is placed over here on the mirror plane. And if we start sketching, we're actually sketching on that mirror plane, but in a 2D way. So actually, this is kind of perfect for laying out a side view. So with this, now what we can do is start to, loosely sketch the side view of our 2D sketch. Now this is, again, this is like a really simple sketch, but it's also a really clean sketch. So ideally, if I was doing this with my own work, what I would probably do is start with the stroke tool on point mode. And I'll show you guys that in a little bit. But just to show you different ways of approaching this, we're going to do it with the ink tool first. And you could be as loose or as tight with this as you want. I'm going to be pretty loose here to start out just because we're using the ink tool, and then I'll be a lot tighter with the stroke tool. Okay. So just a couple of seconds, we have a side view sketch here. And then because we've had the mirror tool this entire time, even though we're creating a side view sketch, whenever we go and we move this off of the mirror plane, it's still symmetrical. So we'll have, both sides of this. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is grab and duplicate this out and shift it in X. Now, that's going to produce like a really rough proportion of what this vehicle is. And then what we can do is take these sketch lines and start shifting them inwards. Now, I know I just went through that really quickly, but I'm going to show you how to do that in just a little bit. I just want to show you what this looks like first to be able to move these sketch lines out in X and then make adjustments later. All right, so you can see in a couple of seconds here, we have a better idea of what the proportion of this car is. All right, so how did we actually do that? Let's press back a few times. All right, the way we did that is the way that we move this out in X perfectly is by using a feature called Smart Move. So I'm just going to create a little scrap piece of geometry here and show you how I did that. So Smart Move, as I was saying before, allows you to move something perfectly along an axis. This is kind of a difficult feature to get, to grips with, and when you're first starting, your creation process in Gravity Sketch, but it's an incredibly useful tool because not only can you move objects in X, Y, and Z perfectly, but you can duplicate them in X, Y, and Z perfectly. And then you can also place these objects into edit mode and take each of these individual edit points and move them in X, Y, and Z in the same manner. And this is really important for just a higher level of precision in this program. So if you wanted to create a really clean line and you just wanted to bump this edit point over a couple of inches in order to get the right tension for a vehicle, you can do that using Smart Move, where it might be a little bit more difficult to just eyeball it and move it in 3D space normally, or the way you would with a normal grab. Okay, so in order to use that feature, there's one thing we need to do first, and we've got to make sure that that feature is actually turned on, so that Smart Move is actually enabled. To do that, you'll press the blue menu button, go to Settings, and there's this option here right below Mirror Style that says Smart Move. All the way to the left is off, to the right is X, Y, and Z, or sorry, to the middle is X, Y, and Z, and to the right is all directions. X, Y, and Z and all directions only differ by, if we put this on all directions, I can move this perfectly along an axis, but this axis can be completely random. It doesn't have to be locked to X, Y, or Z. When you're first starting out, I would highly suggest you just leaving this on X, Y, and Z, because it's really rare that you need to move something along a random axis, but it's really common that you have to move something along these three major axes.
Hey, Emil, just really quick, we have two questions in the chat.
Mhm.
So the first one is, when should you use the ink tool versus when should you use the stroke tool? Like, what's the difference? And then the second one is just asking more about how you duplicate things. So like how you're duplicating your lines and stuff.
Yeah, those are great questions. So I'm going to address the first one. So the difference between stroke tool and ink tool is kind of like the difference between Photoshop, just sketching with a regular Photoshop brush, and then using something like the pen tool. So if you were to come in here to the ink tool here, and actually I'm just going to turn off planar really quickly. The ink tool is like, it's like your sketchbooking tool. You know, you're going to use a lot of messy lines like this. You're just trying to get the idea out as quickly as possible. And then with the stroke tool, you can come through here and start cleaning things up and like really presenting your idea, yeah, in a much more like thought out way. But the ink tool is really good for just this quick ideation, and also stylistically, it gives you this nice little taper. You can also change the aesthetic of that taper if you switch this to like speed mode, which tapers the line based on the speed that you're sketching. So you can get this like really cool ballpoint pen look. But yeah, essentially that's whenever you would want to use the ink tools for these like quick ideations like this. And then kind of skipping ahead here, but very relevant. What you can do is then take that loose sketch, which, you know, by no means is perfect. These lines still need like a lot of shape and care. But what you can do is lower that loose sketch that you did that might have only taken, you know, 2 minutes to produce the sketch, but you did six of those sketches, lock it, create a new layer, and then come in here with the stroke tool, set to point mode, and make some very clean lines like this. So just like in the like with traditional sketching, how you take an initial napkin sketch and then place a piece of paper over top of it and do like a clean overlay. That's the exact same workflow here in Gravity Sketch. You want to get your ideas out as quickly as possible, and then you want to go in with a more precise tool and start to refine and realize that idea. So that's kind of the difference between those two drawing tools. To answer the other question, I'm just going to carry on here with what I was saying with Smart Move. And once you have those options turned on, this is how you actually engage Smart Move. So you can see in the space here, we have X, Y, and Z. What you need to do is take your controllers and align them to be parallel with whatever axes you want to move along. So in this case, if we want to move along the Y-axis, I'll take my drawing hand controller here, highlight any geometry that I want to move along that axis using Smart Move. So just highlight it like this. Take your left-hand controller, place it beneath it, and you'll see this piece of UI that pops up. Just a fair warning, if your controllers are angled a little bit like this or incorrectly angled, you won't see that UI pop up. You'll see as soon as I do have them correctly placed, that piece of UI pops up between both controllers. So I'm not pressing any grab buttons right now. I'm just highlighting, placing my controller underneath, and I get that UI that appears. Once you get the UI, you can hold the grab button and then just shift this up and down on the axes. Now, let's say we want to do that in the x-axis. Rather than holding your controllers in a really weird way like this, just position your environment so that you're basically making the same action, and then move that along the x-axis. Same thing here with the z-axis. If you find that it's difficult to position yourself correctly in order to use Smart Move, that could be because you have vertical lock turned on. When you have vertical lock turned on, it doesn't allow you to tumble in all directions. It keeps the y-axis as up, and it won't allow you to change in those different directions. So sometimes whenever you're sketching, it's better to turn off vertical lock, and that will allow you to tumble around the environment like this and get the best angle to lay down a sketch line or move a sketch line like this. I think also as a part of that question was duplication. How do I duplicate an object using it that way? To regularly duplicate an object, you just have to hold it. And while you're holding it, you press the index finger on the drawing hand. Every time you press it, you'll make a duplication. If you want to duplicate something perfect with Smart Move, it's the exact same action I showed you before. And then when you're ready to make a duplication, you just press the index finger. Okay, so with that said, now what we're going to do is what we were covering before. I'm going to delete away that new layer I created. We're going to go back a little bit. I'll unlock this and we'll go back to our loose sketch. All right, so we want to move and duplicate out the center line so that we can get a good proportion of what this vehicle actually is. So what I'm going to do is face myself down like this, press up on the joystick to change the size of the grab sphere to make it nice and large, highlight all the lines, and move it in Smart Move. So once I have that UI between my controllers, I'll grab so that I can move it, press the index finger to make a duplication, and then shift this out in the x-axis. And now what I can do is grab these individual lines and start moving them around using Smart Move to proportion this vehicle. If you want to group lines together, you can just grab multiple lines, hold them, press the purple button, and now they're grouped. And that will make it a little bit easier to move those together. So I'm going to group these lines for the roof, and we'll just start positioning them. All right, this isn't supposed to be too aesthetically advanced. I'm just trying to get a rough idea of proportion before we start doing some loose sketching. And also for the center line, you can start deleting away some of these lines that aren't doing you any service here. So let's move in this character line.
And then we have a question too about mannequins as you're getting everything set up. So how do you make sure your 1-to-1 scale mannequin fits in the package?
Yeah, well, the first thing would be to make sure that you're using the rig chassis, because the rig chassis is always going to be locked to the correct dimensions in real life. So 1-to-1 dimensions. So now that we have the rig chassis, we know that our car is, at least so far properly proportioned. And what we could do is drop a mannequin in at 1-to-1 scale as well. If you haven't dropped a mannequin in at 1-to-1 scale, the way that you do this is by pressing the blue menu button, coming back here to prefabs. And then what you can do is reach in and grab either of the mannequins and hold it and drop it in this blue box. Or you could just point and click on that mannequin, and that will also import it. It's probably better to just point, click, and then you can see in the center of the environment, we have this highlighted mannequin. It's not a real object, it's just a preview. And then we also have this extra menu that popped up here. Because we pointed and clicked on that to import it, we can use these arrows to adjust which way it's facing. And we also know that it's properly being imported at 1-to-1 scale. So we can press the blue check mark and actually import that mannequin, and then zoom into it like this. I'm going to just shift it out this way for a second. Zoom into it like this, grab it, hold it, press the blue menu button, and place it into edit mode. Very quickly on the mannequin, if you guys haven't used this too much yet, there's one little caveat with how you adjust it. There are green points that allow you to adjust the limbs very gesturally like this. And these green points work better on certain parts of the body than others. So for instance, if I were to grab this ankle one and I start moving the leg up like this, kind of pushes the knee in, twists the shin, and it doesn't work very well. It still allows you to, gesturally adjust the leg, but just not in a way that, an actual human body would move. So for that, you'll want to flick the joystick on the right-hand controller, left and right, and that allows you to cycle between green points and blue points. Blue points allow you to adjust a single pivot point, and green points, of course, adjust many pivot points. So I usually flick this to the right and change the legs with the blue points like this, maybe even the back as well, like the lower back. And then I flick the joystick left or right to get the green points here and use that for like the arms and like some of the torso or the torso as well. All right, probably need to adjust this a little bit more because it's a Porsche. And then you can take that, use Smart Move, and start placing it in the vehicle. Again, this is like an initial sketch that somebody had on the internet, so who knows how like actually, properly proportioned it actually is. But that's the entire point of gravity sketches, taking a loose sketch and then making it more and more feasible, while you're going through the design process. So actually it looks like their sketches is pretty well proportioned. Cool. So actually we'll keep those mannequins right now. Let's create a new label for them, or actually we can drop them on the chassis layer. There we go. All right. So back to sketching with the ink tool. What we'll do now is, now that we have this rough proportion, I usually like to lower that sketch, create a new sketch layer, place it right beneath that, and call this sketch 2. And now this is when I start sketching, freely. So I'll come in here and let's change this to flat material. I'll come in here and start, sketching over top of this like proportion that we laid out here. All right, I know we have a room full of transportation and mobility majors, so I'm just gonna caveat this sketch with, I am not sketching a real proportion or a real Porsche, and I'm not trying to, so I don't upset any of the Porsche lovers. Just gonna make a car. Again, you want to be really loose if you're using the ink tool, because we're just trying to kind of hone in our design, roughly proportion things before we go in with the ink tool. If you make mistakes, you just delete a line really quickly, or press the red back button once, and that's basically Control Z in Gravity Sketch. And you'll kind of see, like, the more you sketch in this program, the more you figure out what your actual VR sketching style is. Sometimes it's really similar to what your 2D sketching style is. So if you're somebody that likes to sketch with like contour lines, then you might sort of like lock yourself in the correct position here and then just do a single contour line, and that becomes your style. Other people sketch really hairy. That's usually how I sketch. And so it's like a lot of little lines and kind of like cross hatching and things of that nature. But it's going to be a little bit rough in the beginning when you're learning to sketch in this program, but you will have a style that kind of comes out of it. And again, with this loose sketch, you can go as detailed or kind of high level as you want. I'm going to try and keep things moving here and just sketch the more dominant parts of the vehicle so that we can start creating a clean line sketch. And yeah, I know I said that we're going to be really kind of figuring out the proportion here, but it's all about these little steps towards a more final design. So it's not going to be perfect in this initial sketch. That's what later clean line sketches for. Oh, also, I do want to show you different ways that you can utilize the planer tool, which is what we were using to sketch the side view in the beginning with, because there's some really cool use cases for it. First, what I'm going to do is just turn down our 2D sketch here. I don't think we really need it anymore. And then I'm going to press the purple menu button here and click on the ink tool again and turn on planer. Now, when you first turn this tool on by default, as you were seeing before, it is placed on the mirror plane, which is great when you're first starting out. But what you can also do is change the position of this and make a sectional drawing. And that kind of takes the place of like a fishbone model. And it's really nice because it allows you to understand what is truly happening with the sections of the vehicle or the surfacing of the vehicle without doing any surfacing. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment here. And so you can kind of position this. I usually position it 3 places along the car. The front across the axle, the center of the car, and then the rear across the axle as well. And then, of course, the center line. Okay. And the way that you change the location of this is by holding in the index finger on the left-hand controller. So you're sketching with the right-hand controller and you're placing with the left-hand controller. If you hold in the index finger all the way, you place this thing very freely. And when you let go, you can see it's just on some random axes, but we're still, sketching on a 2D plane. If you lightly hold this trigger and rotate the face of your controller to be parallel to one of the 3 major axes, then you can actually lock it to one of them. So I'm going to place this so that it's facing the y-axis and it's upright, and that allows me to lock it to the y-axis and start sketching, a section line somewhere along the vehicle. Same thing with side view here, and same thing with, locking to X or the Z-axis here. This is also useful for sketching out some initial wheel wells. You can kind of just lock it to the y-axis like this and drag it all the way to, the edge of your wheel here, and, do some initial sketches for the shape of the wheel well. This is some sort of a mid-engine sports vehicle, rear engine sports vehicle. So it's going to be more of a round shape like this, but with off-roaders, it's really nice to sketch more unique shape for the wheel well. All right, and rather than sketch another one on the rear wheel, I'm just going to group those lines, duplicate it, and shift it down the line here, because it is still the initial sketch. And we can shift it inboard a little bit as well. And we'll turn planer back off and do a little bit more sketching here before we get to the clean line. This is also a good part of the process to incorporate some cross hatching if you want to. Or something else I like to do is make a single line like this, hold it, and just duplicate it. And that kind of can indicate where you have a change in the surface. Okay. Cool. So once we have our initial sketch like this, it's kind of far from perfect, but that's why we're going to create a clean line drawing here. All right. So now that we have this initial sketch, what I'm going to do is actually place all these sketch lines on the same layer. So I'm going to expand the grab sphere, grab all the sketch lines, and drop this on the first sketch layer here, and lock it. And then I'll repurpose this second sketch layer that I had just by clicking the name and calling this overlay or clean sketch or something along that line. So let's do clean sketch, blue check mark. Everything else is locked. My clean sketch layer is active. and the visibility is turned all the way up. In my loose sketch, the visibility is turned almost down to 0. It's just kind of ghosted, and I can, but I can still see it in the sketch around it. So now what we're going to do is what we did a little bit earlier. Purple menu button for tools, click on the stroke tool, click on it twice, and actually I'll just run through the stroke tool here really quick. When you first click on the stroke tool and start sketching with it, it kind of seems like it's the exact same thing as the ink tool. And the only difference being there's no taper to the line. It's just kind of a even consistency. But this tool actually has a lot of really cool properties to it. So if you click on it one more time and you get this menu, you can turn on this option here called point mode. Change the color and material so you can see this a little bit better. Now that point mode is turned on, each time I press the index finger on the drawing hand controller, it drops in an edit point, and you can kind of notice that that line is stuck to my hand. The way you terminate this line or kind of like close it off is by clicking the index finger on the opposite hand controller. And that closes the line off. So what you could do is like quickly lay down a line like this. It looks, relatively neat. Then take it, place it into edit mode, and make finer adjustments. And so that's exactly what we're going to do here. Let me make this black, flat material. Just going to come in here and start sketching some lines. Again, they will not be perfect when you first sketch them. You do have to place them into edit mode and make changes to them. Notice how much I'm moving around, changing my position, and like placement in the environment. It's really important to get comfortable with navigation, especially when you're first getting started out with Gravity Sketch, because the more active you are in changing your location and perspective when you're creating something, the better you understand it as a 3D object. And if you don't get comfortable with navigation in the software, it's going to be really difficult to get to the point where this is like a second language for you. So definitely while you're creating, even if you don't think it's necessary, lay down a line, zoom out, change, your perspective on it, understand where it's being laid in 3D space, and then, zoom back in and get back to the kind of nitty-gritty work. All right. Also, when you're first, I might have already said this, but when you're first getting used to this tool, a lot of people have a tendency to be super cautious about where they're laying down each of these lines because, well, now we're using, precision sketching tool, and I want to make sure my lines are perfect and, all that. That's fine, but like, I would really suggest, just because you're making a precision sketch line doesn't mean you have to spend all day, concerning about where you're going to lay down that line. I'm relatively loose about where I lay down these sketch lines because I know I always have the option to come back in here with edit mode and make, as many adjustments as I need to it. So I might do a line like this and realize, yeah, that's not too good. Also, if you want to close off a sketch line, what you can do is grab it, hold it, place it into edit mode. And on your edit menu here, there's an option called loop. Just toggle that to the right or the left to turn that function on and off. So to close it to one continual line or not. And these edit points, you could just grab them, delete them, or you can hold one edit point and press the index finger and duplicate another one out. Or you could just click anywhere on this line and drop in an extra one. Okay, I'll come back to that. I don't really know what to do with that element on the car. Okay, so on this rocker here, I'm going to show you another little trick here that I think is kind of useful. So we could come in here and just try and click in the rocker to the best of our ability and, you know, make sure it's all lined up in the right directions and probably get pretty close actually. Or what we can do is sketch this on a flat plane first and then push the different edit points in X in order to shape that line. Yeah, maybe the rocker's not the best place to show that. Okay, we can show it here on the spoiler for like a simpler starting point. So what you'll do is on the stroke tool, again, go to it, click it twice and turn on the planer. And then we can lock this plane to any of the major axes and click out the spoiler, in this case, from a top view. Now that I've placed this into edit mode, taken the line and placed it into edit mode, I can grab one of these points and try and pull it down in Y, but it's not going to work. It's only going to move in X and Z for me because it's still respecting the plane that we sketched it on. If we want to break the relationship between the plane and the sketch line that we have in edit mode, on your edit panel, you can just turn off planar for any individual object that you sketched with the plane on. And then now we'll be able to use Smart Move here and move this down precisely in this case, the Y-axis. So that's a really nice way of sort of like mapping out something with the restraint of sketching it on a 2D plane. And then once you have it down, making your finer adjustments.
Emil, we have another question in the chat. So when using the surface tool, is there any way I can display the surface in like a shaded mode without the mesh?
Shaded mode without the mesh or with the mesh?
It says without mesh. Sarah, can you clarify? Does that make sense?
Can you, hello? Hello?
Okay, so Sarah will be right here. Sarah, go ahead.
Like, could you do like maybe just like a surface just so I can point it out?
Yeah, sure.
Well, did we lose you?
Nope,
There
I'm
we
here. 1 second.
Okay, I mean like the surface tool that you can do like the points from like one line to another line, like the one that you can kind of drag a surface along two lines.
So like with bridge, like point
Yeah,
light
yeah,
surface?
yeah. Bridge. Okay, so yeah, on mine it's like it has like each of the points and like those. I don't know how to like change the display, I guess, is what my question
Oh,
is.
is this what you're seeing here?
Yeah. So is that just which setting is that?
Yeah, so you just go to settings under sketching aid, and on the bottom here you have surface contours. And you can just slide that all the way to the left.
Yeah,
Alright.
perfect.
Cool. By the way, if I'm going too slow on this, or if this is kind of like things that you guys already know, just give me a shout and I'm happy to sort of fast forward through this process here.
Yeah, no, Emil, this is great. I think the main thing for them will be creating different iterations, you know, from this. So cleaning up, overlay, underlay, sketches like that. If you can show us any simple ways of starting to mock up surfaces, that could be very helpful. So once you have a couple key lines, how would you go about just understanding the volume a little bit?
Yeah, great point. So let me make one last key line here, and then I can show you, or actually two last key lines here, just the haunches on the vehicle, and then I can show you guys how to lock in some very quick, easy surfaces. Okay, so let me make these dark black as well. And kind of bow this out just a little bit. And turn off planar. Okay, so let's see if we just turn down this initial sketch all the way, what this looks like. Okay, so some key lines, we'll leave it on. And I'm gonna turn off the chassis here real quick. So let's say we wanted to like very quickly capture some surfaces here. One of the best ways I believe like for automotive to actually surface is for you to create a new layer here and call this sub D or surface, doesn't matter what, as long as it's separated out. So we do sub D, lock your clean sketch or whatever sketch you're actually, surfacing over top of, make sure that that layer is active, and then come back here to the purple menu and click on the stroke tool. So again, by default, it looks like this. We'll change a few options here. Quick point mode, ribbon stroke, and then turn on sub D. And what you can do now is, I'm going to choose a better color to surface with here. What you can do now is the same thing that we were doing with clean line. So you can sketch with a clean surface and then close it off, take that surface and start to build off of it. So I'll show you how this looks in practice. We can start here with this main character line. That is still pretty wonky, but we can start here. And because it's a major character line, what we want to do is lock in this character line as a theoretical. So I can make a surface like this, place it into edit mode and still make all my little adjustments. So move this up to add a little more character to it. And then I can do the same thing in the rear here. And let's say one other part of the vehicle where we'll do the front fascia. Again, really quickly, placing these and making adjustments after the fact. Then I can move this to the mirror plane, connect that surface across the mirror plane. All of this is sub D surfaces. Okay, so now we have a few different surfaces. And each of these surfaces is separate. So let's color them different here so that we know that they're different surfaces. Now what we can do is take them, place them into edit mode, and then on any of these dotted edges, hold the dotted edge, grab it, press the index finger, and duplicate that surface. And this makes it really easy to just sort of take your major character lines and start surfacing around them. And the really nice thing is that as long as you are extending surfaces off of that major character line, you are not changing where you originally placed that, meaning that that's safe as a theoretical. And you can, of course, start building off of it. Now you could be as loose or as tight as you want with this. So you can just, if you wanted to duplicate this off and just drag it in full 3D space like this and very quickly get some surfaces, or you can use Smart Move and very precisely move these things around. Once you get to a point like, let me advance this one a little bit more so that we can actually talk about how to merge them. Okay. Okay, so once we get to a point like this, where we have like, let's say the hood of the vehicle starting to move up and then the front kind of shoulder here built out also, we have two separate surfaces. We want to merge them together. To merge them together, you want to place one of them in edit mode. It doesn't matter which one. I'll place this blue one into edit mode. I'm getting a little bit of feedback right now. Does somebody have a question? No? Okay.
So far, so good. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll place one of them into edit mode, this blue one here. And then on your controllers, once you have a piece of sub D geometry that's actually in edit mode, you'll notice that the color menu button changes from a color menu to a hammer and brush icon. Again, that's only whenever you have a piece of sub-D geometry in edit mode. So now that we have this one in edit mode and that icon has changed on this button, we can press and hold down on this button and select this option here, the merge tool. Take the merge tool, click on any sub-D surface that we want to join together. And you'll notice now we have edit points on both of them. They're both the same color and shader. And actually they're both the same surface, but we just haven't merged them together yet. We haven't connected them together. So what we can do now is just drag them over to each other like this, connect the points, and merge those surfaces together. So this is a super quick way of surfacing. And all of that, all of the initial surfaces were created with the stroke tool. Okay. Surfaces are a little wonky right now, but it's just a really quick way of getting started here. Cool. Yeah, Alejandro, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you wanted to cover here, but that's pretty much the process. You go from loose sketch, define your proportion, do a loose sketch in a couple of iterations, be really, again, loose about it. And then once you have that sketch, choose which one you want to move forward with, do a clean line sketch over top, and then this, you can do your surfacing with the ink tool set to point mode, ribbon stroke, and then turning on sub-D.
We have another question, Emil. Would you suggest surfacing like this outside of car design? So like for footwear or other stuff in ID?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it depends on the project. If you're making a, actually, I'd say probably this is the dominant way of surfacing nowadays. But like, let's say you're making a stool or something, you could very simply make a line like this that kind of defines what that chair is. Sorry, not a stool, a chair. And start to build off of that main character line. It's basically sketching with the surface and then filling in between. And then of course with the thicken offset tool here, you could just add a really quick thickness to whatever that surface is that you made. And get some quick, pretty quick ideations here. So we could probably make this like some sort of a rocker. But yeah, I'd say just give it a try for any type of design that you want to do. It's incredibly useful with footwear design also. Cool. Any more questions?
No, this is great, Emil. Thank you. This is really, really good.
No problem. All right. So yeah.
One more on what you just did. So how did you separate the sub-D on the chair?
Yeah, so separate's kind of like a newer tool that was created after we created the merge tool. But it's right next to it. So if you create a surface like this, two separate surfaces. Grab one, place it into edit mode, select the merge tool, merge them together like that. And then once you have your surfaces merged together, you can separate them by clicking that same button again, hammer and brush icon, selecting the separate tool, and this kind of looks like a shift select. You just point, click, and select whatever surfaces you want to separate. If you made a mistake, you can hold the index finger on the opposite controller and then click it again and deselect. And then when you're done and you actually want to separate these things, blue check mark. Now you have two separate surfaces again. Cool. So any other questions before we close out today's training?
Yeah, no, this was great. Emil, thank you. Thank you. I think we have everything we need.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Okay, guys, say thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks,
Have a good one.
everyone. Ali, I'll send you the recording once it's done uploading.
Yes, thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Emil. See you soon.
See you guys.
Have a good
Bye.
one.
Bye.